You're listening to 3D Radio here on 93.7 FM, and the show is Proud to be Loud. Seawolf, a heavy metal band out of Melbourne from the 1980s, have just had an anthology released by Stormspell Records called The Terror from the Sea. And joining me on the line is vocalist Wayne Dwyer. Hi Wayne, how's things going?
Hi Leah, I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
Thanks for joining us on 3D. Before we talk about the anthology, can you give us a bit of a brief history of Seawolf?
Sure. The band started in, as I found out recently when I was writing the bio for the CD, they actually started in 1981, and they were all pretty young guys. They were all like 11 and 12 years old when it first started, but they were pretty talented guys for their age, really, and they just started jamming on songs for their favourite bands and progressed from there. And I met them in 1984 when I was about 14 or 15, and they asked me to come and sing for them because their singer left, and we ended up playing some school halls and backyard parties and that kind of thing until we sort of ran into some of our, I call them our heroes in the local scene, bands like Nothing Sacred and Taramis and Tyrus and those sort of bands. And they kind of took us on board and gave us 2 support slots. So we kind of broke into the local scene from there, wrote a lot of songs and did a lot of gigs back in the day for sure.
I was just going to say that Seawolf seems like one of those bands that were very active in their day, but because the band didn't release an album or any vinyl, you sort of fell into obscurity after all these years. So I was really thrilled to see this anthology come out. What was it like being part of the very early days of the metal Melbourne scene?
Oh, it was awesome. The thing we have to remember, though, is that we were really young. Like, we were all 14, 15, and all the bands that were kind of gigging were a lot older than us, like maybe 5 years older. So they all had cars and equipment and jobs and stuff. So we were kind of these wide-eyed kids, and we saw the scene from the outside. Like, we would sneak into gigs and we'd hear about shows, and we'd go to Metal for Melbourne, the shop, and hear about all these bands that were playing locally. So a lot of the kids in our age who were into metal weren't really into the local scene, but we really wanted to be a part of it. So seeing it from like the outside and being so young, it was just great to break into it and hearing all these bands that were writing original music. And there was something different about Australian metal, just the melodies and the attitudes of the bands and everything was a lot different to the stuff we were listening to that was coming from overseas. And that was even apparent to, well, certainly to me at the time, that there was a different vibe happening. It was very underground, of course. It's still underground, like overseas in Europe and parts of America, metal's kind of mainstream. You hear it on local radio and all that kind of thing, and mainstream radio, but over here still it's just so underground, and it was like that back then. So you really felt you were part of this movement for sure.
Yep. So being so young, I would imagine that posed a lot of problems.
Oh, without a doubt. We had no gear. I mean, we had stuff. Our bass player, his dad was a professional muso, so we kind of had a little bit of like he had some gear that he inherited off his dad, and the guitarist and the drummer, they were brothers, and they came from an Italian family, so their parents were really confused by what we were doing. So they weren't impressed, but we rehearsed in their garage, so their parents just had to put up with it and kind of learned along the way that this is what we were going to do. So yeah, we were unable to drive, so we were trying to get our parents to drive us to gigs, and we had a lot of support from our parents overall. Of course, being so young, trying to get into pubs, there were times when we got kicked out, and our friends that were our roadies, they were getting kicked out of shows and stuff like that. So yeah, it was hard, and I won't say we weren't taken advantage of, because we were by some bands, like as far as payment goes and that kind of thing, but certainly none of the bands that we knew well and that we admired. But there was a little bit of chunky deals going on here and there as well. So yeah, we were naive, but yeah, it was awesome.
It was around this time that the band entered a inter-school Battle of the Bands competition, which you happened to win. Tell us about that experience, which I believe led to some free recording time in a studio.
Yeah, well, it was a Battle of the Bands competition. It was like the state inter-school, so it was a big deal for us. We were representing Hampton High School, which was the band the other 3 guys went to. They'd been in the year before and got the Encouragement Award because they were the only band that wrote all originals. So when I joined the band in, I think it was February 84, or March 84 actually, the Battle of the Bands was in the July. So we just had a few months to kind of get it together. And yeah, we rehearsed the hell out of it, and we wrote a few new songs, and we really put on a show, and we won. It's still one of the highlights of my musical career, to be honest with you. Just seeing our parents, who were doubtful and weren't sure what the hell their kids were doing, win this competition that had a lot of bands from other schools that were kind of playing Cyndi Lauper and, the pop stuff of the time.
Yeah.
and then winning that and being able to go in and do a professional record or semi-professional recording for a day with a guy from the Little River Band was awesome. It was it was a really good time for sure.
Before we get onto those recordings, during the Battle of the Bands competition, were you playing in front of a crowd? I would imagine school kids.
Yeah, like each band probably brought their own fans, and we were lucky enough that it was at the school that was near the school that we were representing, so there was a lot of people there. It was a huge crowd for us. It was a school hall and, gymnasium sort of size, and it was full. So, and I've since found out that the guys from the band No Remorse, who we didn't actually know at the time, they drove up from way down in Frankston to see us play. They'd heard that we were doing it. So we had people that we didn't know coming to see us play as well. So that was really cool. So yeah, it was a big audience and they were right behind us. There were a few boos from the other schools that we've got on cassette, but overall, we've got video of it on YouTube, that performance, and it was huge. It was a big deal for us, of course. Yeah.
I must admit, I was pleasantly surprised with the quality of the sound recordings of the old demos and live recordings on the anthology. As I said, you didn't record an album or release any vinyl back in the day. Did you shop any of these demo recordings to any of the local labels at the time in the hope of a record deal?
Well, the only thing we had was the 2-song demo that we originally recorded, and that quickly fell by the wayside because we changed our sound. Like we went to a 4-piece, my voice broke and we just sounded a bit different. So we just didn't attempt to do anything like that. We were pretty young and naive. We didn't know how to do it. I think there was a sense that we knew we weren't ready to do that.
Yeah.
So no, we didn't shop it around. We just weren't smart enough to know how to do it, to be honest with you. Even though bands like Bengal Tigers and Nothing Sacred were releasing vinyl, we just didn't feel we were ready, I reckon. I don't think we ever said it out loud, but I think we just knew that we weren't there yet.
So did you try and get the tape out through the tape trading network that was happening in the underground at the time?
No, we just we didn't know about the tape trading network. We were probably, again, it was probably a little bit, we were a bit before that time for us.
Yep.
Looking back, I know that there was tape trading happening, but we certainly weren't a part of that scene, so we just didn't know that it existed, to be honest with you. It wasn't until bands like Metallica and stuff started getting tapes out that we realised that there was a bit of a tape trading scene going on. And through a friend of mine who was a roadie for the band at the time, he was doing a bit of tape trading as well. So no, we weren't a part of that for sure. We didn't, again, too young and stupid to know that it was a thing that we could have done.
Yep.
Yeah.
As you mentioned in the liner notes in the anthology, the Australian metal scene was extremely underground at the time. What led to Seawolf calling it quits in 1987?
So at that time, we were all sort of finishing high school. So a couple of guys were heading on to uni, and of course that's a big deal. So that was taking precedence, and I remember distinctly that we cancelled a couple of gigs because of conflicts, because of things like uni and school and whatever. I think we were just losing a little bit of interest. Gigs weren't as forthcoming as they were. The scene was changing a little bit at that time. I actually left the band. I decided to I didn't want to go to uni. I wasn't really academically inclined at the time, and I just wanted to get out and play music and make that my life, which in a way I kind of did. So I just went on to join other bands, and I just wanted to keep active. And Frank and Jamie, the bass player and the drummer, they went on to uni, and I guess that's 3 or 4 years where you've got to concentrate on what you're doing. I mean, they still kept playing, but the band didn't officially break up, but I think me sort of deciding I wanted to move on and keep playing with other bands, that kind of, it just fell apart after that.
So after Seawolf split, as you said, you started getting involved in other bands. I think a couple of the bands that you were involved were Captain Trips and Volvagun.
Yeah, so Captain Trips, I think I joined them in 1990, 89 or 90. I was playing with a couple of different bands at the time, and they were looking for a singer, so I was aware of them because they'd been playing the local scene. So, they asked me to join, and it was just my kind of music. I'd been with Seawolf, the guys, we grew up listening to stuff like Iron Maiden and Sabbath and Deep Purple, and then later on, early Motley Crue and early Rat, Van Halen and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I started listening to heavier, faster music, like early Anthrax and maybe a little bit of Venom and that. So Tarkesis were more like Testament and early Forbidden. So that was the music that I was interested in playing, a little bit more technical and a bit more progressive, I guess, and thrashier. So, that really appealed to me. So, I joined Tarkesis, and that evolved into Captain Trips.
Yep. You also got involved in producing as well.
Yeah, over the years, I just I really love the idea of recording studios. It's somewhere I'm really comfortable, especially I think with the Captain Trips album that we did, Tarkasa / Captain Trips album that we did. We were in a full-on studio for a week, and I just sucked everything in as far as the technology goes and learning how to do things. And that became a real interest. So, of course, you buy an 8-track and then you buy a 16-track recorder and work your way up from there. So I've always been interested, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to record and produce different bands along the way, including my own stuff as well. As you mentioned earlier, Volvagun, I did 2 albums over the last few years, and there's a band called Basel, who are like a black death metal band out where I live, and I've recorded I think maybe 4 albums with them. And I do a bit of mastering for some overseas bands and local bands as well when they need it. So yeah, I'm still involved in the scene in that way for sure.
And what, the rest of the guys didn't really stay involved in metal after Seawolf?
I think we all still kept listening to it. The guitarist and I formed I wouldn't call them all-star, but a band of people from different Melbourne bands. We formed a cover band called Dead Zone, so we were just playing metal covers for quite a few years outside of our original act. So we were doing that, and then Frank and Jamie, they were at uni, but they were still dabbling in bands. And then when they'd finished uni and, we were all sort of had regular income, we put together cover bands so to supplement our musical desires and stuff. So we were able to do our original things, but also just make our living playing, 3, 4, 5 nights a week in pubs playing covers.
Yep.
Not the music that I really wanted to play, but it certainly teaches you how to write a song and how to perform. And yeah, so I learned a lot about music by playing sort of, regular mainstream songs.
Yep.
Again, it's not my love, but at least I learned a lot doing it. So yeah, we kept playing, but certainly not as a metal band at that point.
Okay, getting back to Seawolf, the anthology also includes new recordings of old Seawolf material. How did that come about, and was it difficult getting everybody back together and involved again?
It wasn't difficult getting us back together to do it because we remained friends. Like, we were still playing together in different bands and dabbling with whatever we were doing. We hadn't played together for probably, 2010, so maybe 5 years we hadn't played together. As Seawolf, it had been a long time, obviously, but yeah, we just had, because of my experience with recording studios, I had the opportunity to ask the guys if they wanted to do it. So yeah, we got back together. The guys rehearsed quite a bit on their own without me, and then they came into the studio. We recorded the drums in 2010, and that was it. We kind of left it at that time, and then a few years later, Jamie got together with a guitar player, and they recorded most of the guitars and bass. And then I was involved in TV and theatre for a long time. So again, nothing happened again after that. So then last year, I just messaged Jamie and said we should finish this album. So he sent me all of the recordings that he had, and yeah, I sang and mixed it over probably 6 or 8 months. So yeah, it took a long time, but I wouldn't say it was hard. It was kind of adventurous going back and rediscovering all the songs that we wrote, and we didn't change much. The songs remain as they were written. There's hardly anything that we added. There's probably maybe 8 or 9 things that we went, maybe we'll just change that a little bit, but certainly nothing that anyone would recognise. So yeah, I think that the recording remains pretty faithful to what our vision of the songs were at the time.
I did notice a little bit of additional rearrangements. I think the song "The Attic" has a little bit of an intro on the re-recorded version.
The intro was always there.
Okay.
We just did. I think there's a demo version on the second CD, and for some reason, when that demo was recorded, we didn't record the intro.
Right.
And one of the other guys probably knows more than I do, but I can't remember us playing the intro live. We might have done, but I can't remember. So
yeah,
it did exist, but yeah, it certainly wasn't on the demo version.
Okay, what about the lyrics? Did you remember recalling all the lyrics, or was that a bit of a problem?
Not too much of a problem. I was pretty slack. I would write lyrics and then forget them. So when we played songs live, I'd just sing what was in my head. I was just riffing and ad-libbing.
Yeah.
With the full knowledge that anyone in the audience probably wouldn't notice because they didn't know what the lyrics were anyway.
Okay.
So I had an idea of the melodies, and I would sing lyrics twice, and then I change them at the next show. And so there's different recordings where I'm singing different lyrics, and somewhere I'm just babbling really. Yeah, as I say, I was pretty slack. So when it came time to do this new recording, I grabbed all the old lyrics that we had written down, and put them back together the way they should have been. And some of them were I could songs like Revenge and Soul Eater. 40 years later, I still have them in my head. I certainly didn't need to go back and look at those ones. It's like riding a bike, I guess. You just don't forget things like that.
Cool. Do you consider the new material on the anthology to be an album? And did you think about perhaps releasing the new material as an album separately to perhaps the old recordings and release that purely as an anthology?
Yeah, it could have been something that we could have done. The issue, of course, with releasing an anthology of older stuff without the new stuff is like, where does it fit? What's the importance of it?
Okay, yeah.
So when I went to the record company, I said, this is something we've recorded, because Stormspell certainly are good at releasing old arcane material. I just went to him and said, I've recorded this album with the guys. Are you interested in releasing it? And he within a minute of hearing it, he went, yep, I want to do it. And he said, we could probably do a second CD if you've got old live stuff. So that was the record company's idea, was to put 2 CDs together and give it all context. He knows that he's got an audience of people that will buy albums that relative to the time that they were recorded, and the fact that the new recordings were fairly faithful to the old, the old sound. That's how that came about. So the initial idea was just to release it as an album on its own, but when he sort of said we need to give it some context, that made a lot of sense to me.
Okay,
it's really great just to have both CDs together.
I think it works fine both ways, but I see where you're coming from. I must also commend you on the production and mix of the new recordings. Although it's modern, it's well balanced and not overly compressed, which I hate about a lot of new metal recordings these days. In terms of,
I agree. Yeah.
In terms of songwriting, it also shows that Seawolf had a lot of variety and depth. There's some great guitar work, variation in speed and tempo and atmosphere. As I said, it's great to see this anthology being released. What are some of your favourite tracks on the anthology?
Favourite tracks, geez. They all have different, you're attached to different things on them. It's interesting what you're saying about the different bits and pieces, just because we were influenced by, like, you didn't sort of say mainly into thrash metal. Like, we listened to everything back then, everything from Thin Lizzy to Venom. There wasn't sort of this division, so we were influenced by everything. But Soul Eater for me is a track, because that's the first song that I ever wrote. Myself and I think the drummer got together one night and put the lyrics together for that.
Is that based on any particular person?
Like, there's a book called Soul Eater, and being influenced by Iron Maiden and knowing that you can write lyrics based on books.
Yeah.
That was kind of what I did, and just this idea of this scary thing living underground that would eat children, that was inspirational to me. So, that song's got a bit of a place in my heart. There Will Come a Dark Stranger as well. I was a big fan of Conan the Barbarian. Used to collect the comics.
Oh, yeah.
And that's based on the idea of one of the comic titles. But the lyrics are probably more to do with anxiety and depression. I mean, you can read them in 2 ways. But if you look at them in that respect, that's kind of where in my head where those lyrics were coming from. So those 2 songs, sure. And the first song, Forbidden Zone, I like that because all 4 of us got together and wrote the lyrics together. And I remember doing that distinctly.
Do you want to make a comment about the production and the mix of the new recordings?
Yeah, it was really important for me to retain the sound of the band as I remembered it in the garage that we used to rehearse.
Yeah.
Frank and Matt had this brick garage with a tin roof. I remember the first day going in there and hearing the sound, and it was really, really loud. Like, the band played really loud and the roof would rattle, and there was this particular reverb that was in there. And I tried to emulate that reverb on the guitars, because I remember having cassettes and going home and listening to what we were doing, and we were really good at that, at recording and listening to ourselves and picking out the problems. And we've always had that attitude. It stays with us to this day, of recognising your own mistakes. Yeah. So those cassettes really informed the way the mix should have been. So the tone of the guitars is pretty top-endy, I think, and that's the way that we sounded. So I didn't want to disguise that. The bass was always really loud because we were a 4-piece, and Jamie's a very busy bass player and very tasteful and quite clever in the things he did. A lot of melody in the bass guitars. So I really wanted to push that forward. And if you compress all that stuff, it gets lost.
Yeah.
And there's no breath and there's no dynamics.
Yeah.
A lot of those old recordings from the 80s, just, there's thousands of bands that never made it, that went into obscurity, that I was listening to on, I just buy albums based on album covers, bands that people have never heard of. And that production, a lot of bands out of Europe, it just had this breath in it, like all the stuff on the Noise label.
Yeah.
So I wanted to emulate that as closely as I could, which is pretty hard with modern recording equipment. The temptation to use compression over everything is really quite high. So I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to make it sound like Seawolf.
Yeah, well done for that. How did Stormspell Records get involved, and is there any chance of the band reforming?
So Storm Spell Records got involved because of my relationship with them through Captain Trips.
Yeah.
A guy from Germany and a guy from Melbourne, they both knew him and they both knew he released stuff. So they sort of encouraged me to get the Captain Trips stuff to him. He was aware of the band because of tape trading, and so he released that. And then when it came time when I'd finished mixing the Seawolf stuff, I sent it to him straight away, knowing that there might be a chance he'd want to release it. So, yeah, that was fairly easy. He's a really great guy to work with. It's just easy. It's just an easy guy to work with. So that was fantastic. And the second part of the question was?
Is there any chance of the band reforming?
Probably not to play live. I guess we could. My health has been a little bit up and down over the last 2 years. I've just had surgery on my spine, so standing up and singing is challenging. My dream is that we will get back together and at least play live. I think we're probably more likely to record again. There's still a lot of material that isn't on the CD that we'd like to do.
Sorry for interrupting. I was going to say, how much more older material do you have that you haven't recorded?
There's probably an album's worth, I would say. Stuff that we never finished, just crazy riffs that are on cassette that I remember hearing them at the time and going, geez, that'd be a good song, and we just never got to them. So we'd probably put those songs back together. Certainly stuff that was never played live. So I've spoken to the guitarist a couple of times about it, and he's just keen to do it. It's just a matter of can we get together and do it. So, yeah, I'd like to. And then the other question is it relevant to what we've done in the past? And I guess it doesn't matter. If we want to do it, we just will.
Yeah.
The songs are going to be good because I think for young guys, we were pretty good songwriters at the time.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, talking about kids you can step outside and see it in the third person. And looking at these kids who were 13, 14 years old, writing songs that were, pretty mature for the time and quite complicated in their arrangements. We knew what we were doing to an extent, which is, as far as songwriting went, nothing else but just songwriting. Yeah, that was definitely our strength. So I'd like to capitalise on those songs. I think they deserve to be recorded at least.
Okay, Wayne, it's been a blast talking to you, and I thank you for appearing on 3D Radio. Is there any last words, any comments you'd like to make before we go?
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you to you. What you guys do, like yourself and other people in radio who support the scene, it's very selfless, and I've always been really conscious of that it's just because you love the music and that your listeners are the same. They've just kept this kind of music alive and giving us the opportunity to be able to get this music that's, it's not new music. It is music is always new the first time you hear it, so I guess it's irrelevant when it was written or recorded. So people like yourself getting that out into people's ears, it's really gratifying and it's humbling as well. So yeah, I want to say thanks heaps.
No worries. Wayne, thanks for that.